Hey folks, I am here at the CBC, as you can well tell, and talking to Jaren Hayman about his new film called This is North Preston. Thanks, Jaren, for joining us.
Of course.
Yeah, so we're in a very loud lobby here. There's some sports in the background, so we're going to just try and speak up so you guys can all hear what's going on. But I'm curious to know, first of all, Jaren, where you got the idea of making this documentary, and then if you can just tell folks who don't know yet what the film's about, what the film is about.
Yes, sure. So it's about a town called North Preston. It's the largest black community in Canada in Nova Scotia. It's a town of about 4,000 people with a serious history of over 2 centuries. People might have known it most as the last stop for people on the Underground Railroad who would eventually migrate to North Preston and areas to live. Most recently, if you Google North Preston, you're going to see a lot about human trafficking and pimping, and that's kind of what the town's been painted as. So how it came about was my old partner in the music industry, his artist, Just Chase, who's kind of the main character in the documentary, came to me about doing something on him. And you know, I was a little bit apprehensive at first, but the more Chase told me about his upbringing, the more Chase told me about the culture, and the more Chase told me about, you know, this place I had absolutely no idea existed. And the further we dove into learning about it, I was just blown away by how incredible of a story it was. And also that no one's told the story in 200 years, in film-wise anyway. So, you know, the movie kept evolving as we were shooting and turning into a bunch of different things, but that's kind of the origin.
That's what happens with docs, right? You come out, you start with an idea, and things kind of change. Because I'm sure. How long were you working on this film for?
About a year.
The filming took a year?
Oh no,
altogether?
The filming. Yeah, just like the film process.
So I think the interesting thing for everybody on our team who watched this film was just finding out about this community. Like, it's a place that you just don't hear about, and you don't know the amazing history behind it, which is actually a really proud moment for Canadian history. This is where we helped, you know, the slaves find freedom as the end of the Underground Railroad, as you were saying. But there's also been a fair bit of controversy around the film because of the subject matter, and I think it's a hard topic for a lot of people to look at without feeling something emotionally. Would you say that's fair?
Yeah.
So we had our team watch this, and our team is all females, except for some of our board members, and it was really split. Like, a lot of people were saying there's not enough female representation here. You're glorifying pimp culture. You know, you're making it look like this is just a great way to live. So how do you answer those concerns or comments?
Yeah, I mean, you know, from the jump, I told these individuals in the movie, you know, this is their story, it's not mine. I'm not going to sugarcoat anything. I'm not going to, you know, try to tell or mistell a story. I wanted them to use their words and paint a picture of what their life is like. So at the end of the day, you're supposed to feel something. You're supposed to think about something. You know, it's supposed to evoke emotion. You know, these guys grew up in a very different atmosphere than a lot of us. And, you know, they were experiencing, certain individuals anyway, you know, it's all they knew as far as their dads were pimps or their uncles were pimps, is what they kind of saw every day. Now, you know, you might not have to agree with that or like it, and I'm sure most people don't agree with that or like it, but it was important for me to, you know, showcase how and why this has happened as well, you know, and it's not just looking at them and you know, painting them with a certain brush. It's you know, there's decades and decades of ingrained culture that contributes to this happening. You know, and it was also really important for me to get the female side of things, and that's why we interviewed 2 different trafficking victims. And you know, every time one of the, you know, especially the pimp whose identity was covered, every time he said something that was so outlandish or so out of this world that most people wouldn't agree with, we cut immediately to one of the victims to say how it actually is and how it actually affects them. You know, and some of these guys, they might not even have ever thought about the other side of things, you know, and that's part of the problem too. So, you know, you can't change anything without understanding it. So it's a big part of me in doing this movie is to, okay, yes, this exists. Yes, this is going on. It's troubling to watch at times in the movie. It's very challenging. But it's also important to know that it's happening. And as far as the glorifying side of it, I mean, it's a documentary. So, you know, it's not glorifying, I don't think, at all. I think it's just showing a part of life and being as real as possible to the truth of these guys' story. And you know, if it makes people angry and upset, then that's an emotion that you're supposed to perhaps have.
Yeah, I think you said a couple of interesting things there. One of which is that you're not glorifying; you're just showing what has been ingrained in this community for hundreds of years. And I guess you could, in some ways, liken it to documentaries about racists or people living in certain communities where that's just been the way it's been, and they're unapologetic about it because it's all they know. It does seem glorifying, just in the sense that you're seeing these people who are unapologetically having these house parties with their guns in full view, and they don't seem to be concerned about it at all, or worried about the cops, or just there's just no sort of. It seems very bizarre to see people partying so cavalier and so casually with handguns on them, and just part of their culture.
Yeah.
Was it weird for you to be filming that?
No, not for me, because I mean, you're always just worried about getting the right shot, and you're always worried about telling the story. So for me, it was just like, let's make sure we're getting everything.
Yeah.
For my crew, it was a little bit, dodgy at times, I'm sure. But I mean, like, it was just, once I was in the world, and it was just kind of trying not to be too evasive and just letting things happen. There was obviously, there's a fight that breaks out that was totally organic and natural, and they said new cameras were there, and things just kind of escalated. So, I mean, that
did not curtail their behavior at all.
I mean, that scene was important as well, by just in the sense of showing this is, you're right, they can be very cavalier about it, and I mean, this isn't obviously everybody in the town, but kind of the younger generation that we focus on, and so.
Yeah, sorry, we got distracted by the handsome gentleman behind us. You also said something interesting off camera in terms of those people who are commenting about the lack of female voices in this documentary. And fair point that you made, that it's very hard to get victims of human trafficking to speak up. And the ones you did represent had their identity masked. But I imagine in a small community where if they're still living there, it's probably extremely dangerous for people to step forward. So do you want to just talk about that a bit?
Yeah, I mean, North Preston still is a very male-dominated culture, and that came to light pretty early on. Getting women to speak, let alone the trafficking victims, was difficult. We still, I think, did a pretty good job of finding them and getting their voices in there, especially the trafficking side of things. But listen, this movie isn't just a movie about pimping. It's a movie about history. It's a movie about social cultural issues. It's a movie about racism. It's a movie about police relationships and violence. So that side of things, if you think it's kind of a male-dominated view, that's maybe done on purpose to show kind of what the culture is like over there. The trafficking side of things deserves its own entire film, 100%. And the voices, it's heartbreaking for the women that we get in there to kind of hear firsthand what it's like. But the movie isn't just about that side of it. So that's why I think it's really important to know that we did this all bird's eye view. Yes, that part might be what people are drawn to a lot because it's the most shocking.
Yeah.
But it's not a movie just about the pimp culture side of things.
So my final question then is, with all the folks that you did speak to, and this is specifically the male population there, did you find anyone who was sort of looking to escape that type of lifestyle?
Yeah, and I mean, that's kind of the message at the end of the movie, is one of hope and change. And a lot of the time back in the day, these guys didn't know better, and now that's not really an excuse anymore. With the internet and the access to information and movies like this, you can't say, my uncle and my brother did this. It's just the culture we're in. That's why you have guys like Veli in the movie saying, it's his responsibility for these kids now to see that this isn't the way. Just the way he did it wasn't necessarily the way. That's why you have guys like Chase, who got out of the community and chased his dreams to think about something bigger. So I think the movie ultimately, as much as the troubles that they've had and issues they've had growing up and developing, it does kind of end on a note of hope and change for the future.
Well, like I said, this was a movie that probably instilled more conversation in our team than 90% of the movies that come across our desks. So for that, I say kudos, because it's really, making documentaries is a challenging thing itself. Making one that sparks conversation is a great feat. So congratulations, and for you guys, you should check out This Is North Preston. Thanks.
Thank you.